Hi there! Today I'm going to be talking about 3D printers a bit. Specifically, I'm going to talk about why I transitioned from my Prusa, which is this machine here. Had this i3 Mark III for maybe five and a half years, over to this new Bambu Labs H2S. So if you watch my channel, it's mostly an electronics channel, but I do a lot of 3D printing. I print, parts for vintage computers, I print cases for my electronic projects, and I print toys for my daughter, like this Flexi Dragon that is around my neck. If you are into 3D printers this year, you will know 2025 has got to be known as the year of the Flexi Dragon. These things are everywhere. They're by a variety of different people making the STLs and the designs for them. You can buy them at fairs, you can print them yourself. Flexi Dragons are the in thing. Let's take him off, because I don't think I want him around my neck for the entire video. There, look at that beautiful two-color Flexi Dragon. We'll talk about him a little bit more later, maybe. So I've had this Prusa i3 Mark III for many years. The nice thing about the Prusa is it's an open source printer. They publish the design files for all of the parts on it, so if a part breaks, you can print it yourself. You can even, the smarter thing to do is before it breaks to print one as a spare ahead of time. So I made a lot of mods to this printer. I added new filament roller up here, my Nixie tube filament display. I changed out the LCD to a VFD. I reprinted the fan shroud. I added a cooling shroud here and another fan for the stepper motor. Got over here a camera mount. I've redone the bearings that are inside of it. You can't see it back here, but there's a Raspberry Pi running Octoprint. This is not as highly customized as some people's 3D printers, but it's still pretty good customized printer. And like I say, the nice thing about this, the Prusa, is, now you'll notice that loud noise here. This thing is printing. It's doing a filament change right now. One of the things about my videos, if I review a printer, I like it to make all of the sounds that it's going to make during the review, so you can compare the sound of my voice to how loud this machine is. So that was a filament change that happened. But anyway, as we were saying, I've had this thing for many years. It's been very reliable printer. I think I only had one failure with it, which was a sensor wire that went to this bed. This is a bed slinger, so the bed moves back and forth a lot, and it just fatigued the temperature sensor wire. I had to replace that. Other than that, this Prusa has been trouble-free. So I decided for this year, for Christmas, I was going to get a new 3D printer. Now, if you are watching this video, you have probably noticed it is not Christmas. It is October of 2025 when I am reviewing this new printer sitting here. So I guess the only thing I have to defend myself is you shouldn't look at stuff online unless you're ready to buy, because if you start looking at 3D printers, you'll end up with a new 3D printer. So this review is mostly going to be about my reasons for switching from the Prusa platform to the Bambu Labs platform, as well as discussing some of the features and maybe some of the challenges with this Bambu H2S printer over here. So when looking at a new printer, this is an i3 Mark III Prusa printer, and the Mark IV would be their latest printer. I think the 4S actually. So this actually went through a lot of iterations. Prusa lets you upgrade each iteration. They support upgrading it. So I could have gone from the Mark III to the 3S to the 3.9 to the 4 to the 4S. I could have done all those transitions. The Mark III worked for me, so I stuck with the Mark III. But their new printer for a bed slinger like this would be the Mark 4S. And I was seriously considering Mark 4S when I read that bed slingers are really kind of on the way out. So a bed slinger, if you're not familiar with the term, it moves this bed back and forth constantly. That's how it does its y-axis. Its x-axis is the print head moving back and forth, and then its z-axis, the print head moves up and down. So that gives you kind of x and z here and y down there. I think the reason why these are on the way out in favor of the XY printers like that are because I think it's a little bit slower to move this bed back and forth. And this tends to put your model under a lot of stress when you're moving it back and forth. So as you get taller, I think you get some issues with just the motion on a tall model moving back and forth. Bed slingers, kind of a thing of the past. Core XY printers are kind of the in thing. So I realized that Prusa has a Core 1 printer, and I was ready to buy the Core 1. It'd be faster than the Mark IV. It'd have an enclosure so I could print engineering filaments. A lot of advantages to the Core 1. I had it in my shopping cart on the Prusa website. I was ready to check out, and then I realized this thing's shipping from the EU. I thought Prusa had US distributor, but no, it's shipping from the EU. So it's got a 15% tariff. It's got a FedEx international shipping fee, like 120, 150 bucks. So, already there I'm up to around $300 in additional costs. That in and of itself would not necessarily deter me from buying a quality Prusa printer just because it's got a tariff on it. You're buying this for the long run. Tariff's a small thing to pay up front. But Prusa did not offer the, I think it's called DDP, Delivery Duty Prepaid, the option to prepay the tariff. So if they don't offer that, then what you're doing is you're having the thing shipped without knowing for sure what your tariff is going to be. So DDP, the seller will charge you and prepay it. Traditionally, the other route is it goes and it gets hung up in customs. You get a bill. There have been just nightmare horror stories from people on Reddit and other places about how they thought they were buying a printer with a 15% tariff and they get like a $600 bill from FedEx or something, and then it's like, what are you gonna do? So no way I'm buying something as expensive as a 3D printer unless it's got DDP, and Prusa didn't offer DDP. So I did find out they do have a US seller. Printed Solid is their US retailer. Now, I don't know why that wasn't like integrated into the Prusa website to automatically send me there, but I found my way to Printed Solid, and the problem I ran into there is twofold. One, a lot of stuff was out of stock. So the Core 1 on Prusa's website came with a free camera, but on Printed Solid, it's like the camera wasn't even in stock. The other thing is Printed Solid's prices were much higher. They were higher than I figure I would have paid had I paid the tariff and the international shipping. I think they were charging $400 extra for the assembled printer and $500 extra for the kit. That I just couldn't justify that expense. So that was the moment when I'm sorry, Joe Prusa, but you lost the sale at that moment. Now, don't worry, Joe Prusa's going to be fine. He sells a lot of printers. My sale isn't going to hurt. But that's the moment when I decided I will ask around and see what my alternatives are. And people told me, what you want is a Bambu Lab printer, which is this thing over here. And it seems like, times have changed from when I bought this and, everybody wanted a Prusa, to when I bought this, everybody wanted a Bambu Lab. So I didn't just blindly buy it. I went through, I watched reviewers, I learned a lot about this printer. I did my research on things like spare parts availability. This is not an open source printer. You cannot just, if something breaks, you can't just go print it. You're going to have to buy the part from Bambu Lab and get it shipped to you. You can't mod this one quite as much as you could mod this one or a Prusa Core one. So a lot of changes going from an open source platform, which I really strongly advocate for, to a closed source platform, which I would ordinarily be opposed to. But where Bambu Lab really shined was on features and price. So if you want to talk your closest apples to apples comparison, I think you would compare the Prusa Core 1 to the Bambu P1S. And I think you're going from around 1,000 something on the Prusa to like 600 on the Bambu, the P1S. It's smaller than this one, comparable size to this one. So you automatically, you've got a huge savings. When you factor in the tariffs and the additional money that Printed Solid is charging, huge difference in price. You can get a P1S with, their automatic material system, your 4-color printing, for significantly less than you could get a Core 1 without the 4-color printing. So at first I was going to go with the P1S, introduce myself to the Bambu Lab platform, on kind of the entry level size like I had here. But then I looked, and this H2S was not that much more money. So I could get the H2S for $1,500. That included the printer as well as the 4-color AMS unit up there. $1,500 for kind of the whole thing you're seeing here. And that was a good deal, because although I moved into paying a fair bit of money, I'm getting a much more capable, much larger printer with this Bambu Lab printer, and that was appealing to me. So this i3 Mark III, it did like 90% of what I needed, but often I would run into limits on the bed size, and it wasn't a big limit. Usually it was like 10 millimeters or 20 millimeters or 30 millimeters, just a little bit more I always wanted. I think that the Core 1 you're going to be, or the P1S, you're going to be around about a 250 millimeter cube size, more or less. I can put up the exact numbers, you can look them up. But you're looking at, I think, around 350 for the H2S. So much bigger build volume in this Bambu Lab printer than I would have got with a Core 1 had I stuck with the Core 1. You can people print full-size helmets in these things. Like you could put over your head a full human-size helmet will fit inside of this printer. It's big enough to fit that. I don't print helmets, so not a big deal. But I do sometimes print project boxes where I was pushing the limits of my Prusa. So a bigger printer automatically was an appealing thing to me. Another thing was that I get the AMS with it. Now, I've never been one much for multicolor prints, but I thought it was an opportunity to investigate that. I've never got an MMU or a palette or anything to go with this. Always did. The most I ever did with this is manually stop the printer and change the filament and do it on a layer like that. So here I can get into the AMS in there, and I can get some experience with practical multicolor printing. Prusa for the Core 1 would offer their MMU3. That would be the current offering, but it seems to me like the MMU3 is a much more complicated, cumbersome system than this AMS. The AMS can sit on top of the H2S here. It's got a single PTF tube that comes down with the filament in it. It's got a roller system where when it wants to change filament, it cuts the filament off, and then it winds it back up onto the spool. It doesn't yank it out all the way, because you don't want to yank it out all the way, but it yanks it most of the way out, and then it winds the other one down in, and that's how it does the filament change. It also has a cutter in it to cut the filament off, and then it's got this purge feature where when it's changing colors, it's constantly kicking these little filament balls out the back. So to me, this was a fairly simple multi-material system. And this is actually the AMS2 Pro up there, which I believe is Bambu's latest. It features a built-in filament dryer, which is kind of nice that it'll dry. You can have it dry the filament for you. You hear now it's doing another filament change. It's kind of noisy when it does that. But it really seems to me like it is a pretty nice system for that AMS. It's got RFID in there. If you buy the Bambu Lab spools, you put them in there. The printer automatically knows what filament you have in there. The slicer knows what filament you have in there. You can select the filaments right from the slicer. Very convenient. That said, there are some disadvantages to the Bambu AMS. And the biggest disadvantage is it is a very wasteful multicolor printing option. In that, when it cuts these things off, it pulls them out, it pushes them back in, it's got to purge it. It leaves that bit of filament in the hot end that it's got to squirt out, which, like I said, it comes out as these little balls. But those little balls add up. I had wanted to do a 60% Sir layers a lot like this. This is a 10-gram model. And I took their slicer and I colored his sword and his shield a different color from his body. This little guy here. And that would have, with the default settings, that would have spent 120 grams on the priming tower plus these little flush purge filaments here, these little balls that come out of it. So roughly 10 times as much filament would have been wasted printing this guy in multicolor. And that's just 2 colors. Now, that's kind of a pathological worst case because this is a very small model. And if you think about it, it doesn't matter how small the model is. Every time you do a layer change, you've got to purge that hot end and kick out the same amount of filament. So the bigger you get with your model, the less fractional waste you're going to have. The other thing you could do is if you orient your model properly. So when I was going to do the multicolor one of these, you know, every layer was going to have to do a color change because this shield is like the whole thing. Flip him on his side, and then you do much fewer color changes. You just get an uglier print if you try to flip him on his side. Right now what I'm doing here is I did tell it, just because I didn't want to waste a bunch of filament while making this video, to do the layer shifts horizontally. So he's going to be kind of a striped sort of layers a lot. He's going to go, you know, yellow, purple, yellow, purple, yellow, purple. It's just a demo so that you can hear the filament changes without me having to do a filament change for every layer. So that is one problem with the AMS, is the waste. The other problem is there is very little clearance up here on this clear plastic cover. And there are some spools, particularly my atomic filament spools, that will not fit in there. And Atomic Filament has fixed their spools. Their spools are now compatible, but you know, I've got all these old spools, won't fit in there. It also says, you know, in the Bambu instructions, don't use cardboard spools. The cardboard will deform, it will shed, it will get into the works. They say don't use the cardboard spools. Now, I don't know, maybe that's just their way of, you know, getting you off of other people's filament and onto Bambu Lab's filament. Because a lot of people have said the cardboard spools work perfectly, but people do have these little rings. If you have a cardboard spool, you can print yourself up some of these little rings, and you just stick them over the edges of the cardboard spool, and now you've got, at least in this case here, I've got a PETG, or it won't chew up the inside of the AMS. So that's one option, print the little rings. It's just a few grams of filament go into a ring, and now you've made your cardboard spool compatible. But that's, like I say, that's one of the annoyances of that AMS, is that if they could have made it just a few millimeters bigger, it would have fit everybody's spools. And I don't know what you do about the cardboard thing. A lot of people just seem to be moving to the cardboard. There are reusable spools. There's a way to hack off the cardboard and slap a reusable spool around it. Like I said, if I run into cardboard, I just use the rings. The other thing about the AMS too is its noise, and it is kind of loud. You've heard it a couple times in this video by now when it spools the filament out and spools a new one in. It's a little bit noisy. It also makes kind of a clunk, a little bit of a clunk every time the motor advances, and I can kind of hear that, and it kind of bugs me a little bit. The AMS at times is louder than the printer. But for all of that, it is a cheap, cost-effective system with a built-in filament dryer, a built-in temperature sensor, a built-in hygrometer. The thing worked flawlessly out of the box. The printer came with a two-color, a top model in it, and I was able to print that. You know, I didn't even have to hook up my computer. I printed it right off of the interface on the front here. By the way, there is a nice little touch screen there. It's showing what we're printing. So again, the features. So I think I've covered the bigger build volume, the AMS. It also seems like a relatively smart printer, that it has a lot of AI features. It will detect, built into the printer, it will detect spaghetti if your print fails. It will detect blobs on the print head. It will detect foreign objects. It will detect printing in the air. Got all kinds of automatic things it detects. It will know if you put in the wrong build plate. It'll know if the build plate is crooked. It's warned me about many of these things. You know, it can stop in the middle of the night due to an issue. You can get up, you can look at it, fix the issue and start it, and it resumes where it left off. The smart features are really good. Of course, being a enclosed Core XY printer, it's, you know, you've got a heated, temperature controlled build chamber in here. That's good for your engineering quality filaments. For your PLA and your PETG, doesn't really matter, but if you want to do polycarbonates and ABSs and ASAs and all kinds of exotic filaments, the heated build chamber is really nice. It's actually got a little vent that pops up there to let in the air, because you need the ventilation for PLA to keep it cool in there. It's got vents that open on the back automatically. It's got a built-in air cleaner, air filters in there. The Prusa, that was an Core 1, that was an extra option. You'd have to hang off the back of it if you wanted an air filter. This is built into the inside of it. It's got an extra cooling fan. It just seems to have a lot of features. They're ahead of the game on this one. And Prusa with their Core 1 feels like they're playing some catch up to me. Another nice thing about it is the hot ends are very easy to interchange. There's kind of a quick mount system in there where you just flip a clip off. You can take a hot end out, replace a hot end. Very easy, very quick change. They're also very cheap. So hardened steel nozzles in this thing, they're only $18 for the entire hardened steel hot end that snaps into there. Very cost effective. You know, I want to go with the Prusa hardened steel nozzle hot ends. They're a little bit more expensive. Not a huge amount of offerings of hot ends, but they've got the basics of the 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8. They've got it in stainless steel, they've got it in hardened steel. There's some good options for you. You can see it's mounted on vibration feet. The thing bouncing around like this, I watched from videos and people said that's actually normal and actually desirable. People do make TPU feet that you can stick under there if you don't like it bouncing like that, but that's just going to transfer your motion onto your table surface, whereas this vibration mount really does isolate the motion. It is, as I mentioned before, it is much less open. There is an MQTT API that you can use to get the status of the printer. I've actually hooked this up to my Grafana monitoring solution so I can query the printer status. But I think if I'm reading right, they have locked down the control API, so you may not be able to control it. There was a big thing that went out in the community where people were afraid that they were going to lock you down onto this, where you would only be able to use their cloud software. But there is a LAN only mode that you can use if you want to use it only at your location and keep it away from the cloud software. Personally, I'm using it with the cloud, but I have stuck this thing on its own VLAN, and it's not like I'm printing any STLs or G-code or anything that I feel is confidential that I would be worried about it getting leaked out. I don't mind the cloud features, and it's nice to know with the LAN only mode, if the cloud services did ever go away, that you would have the option to go LAN only mode and disconnect yourself from the cloud. I hate cloud connected stuff where if the cloud goes away, you've got a brick, and this doesn't seem to be that way. I have had this printer for approximately 1 week, and I've printed it every day. We've been printing like a gazillion Flexi Dragons. My daughter, if you've got a kid right now, you know what I'm talking about. You're printing Flexi Dragons constantly printing Flexi Dragons in different colors, different types of Flexi Dragons. Different people make them. A million different Flexi Dragons you can print. They're the in thing. Let's open up the door so you can get a look in there. You can see things moving around. There's a glass up here that also comes off. If you've stacked it like this, you'll have to remove the AMS to get the glass out. There are people who make tilt brackets for the AMS, so you can tilt the AMS, then take your glass out if you need to get into there. Build plates, so it comes with a textured build plate by default, which is great for PETG. It's fairly good for PLA, but I ordered for my PLA use, I spent the extra money to order a smooth PEI sticker sheet to go in there for PLA prints, because you'll get better adhesion, I believe, with the sticker sheet than you do with the textured sheet. So I swap them back and forth. If I'm doing a PETG print, I'll put the textured sheet back in. If I'm doing a PLA, I'll put the smooth sheet back in. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention is electricity requirements. Now, I'm being careful to say requirements rather than consumption, because I don't think this thing consumes any more electricity than it should for a printer of its size and capability. You know, it has to heat up the hot end, it has to heat up the bed, and it does those about like you'd expect, a couple hundred, maybe 300 watts. But what this thing does do is when it's initially preheating the chamber and the bed, it has an AC heater in that bed, a mains line heater, from what I understand, and that thing draws a lot of current. Only when it's heating up the bed initially. My old i3 Mark III used to take a while for it to heat up the bed. This thing heats up the bed like almost instantly, but it does that at the cost of having a large amount of current that it needs to initially draw. and I think the manual says 1250 watts. I've known some people online, they've told me like 1450 watts they've measured. But if you are in the US, then whether you're talking 1250 or 1450 or even 1000 watts, you're talking a large chunk of a standard US residential 15 amp outlet. I was originally going to have this thing hooked up to my office circuit, which runs my computer, my laser printer, my ceiling lights, all of that. And I realized, while this thing was in transit, before I even had it, I realized that I'm going to be popping breakers if I do that. So I ended up switching things around and hooked this up to another circuit that is not the same as my office, and I don't have to worry about that initial current draw tripping a breaker. But that's one thing you'll want to do is, before you buy this printer, look at the spec sheet, look at what the requirements are, and look at your space that you're going to be putting it in, and make sure it's compatible with your space. So in conclusion, I really hated moving from Prusa's very open platform that I've supported for years to a much more closed platform. But at the same time, it feels like Bambu is 6 months to a year ahead of the Prusa printers. The features are more developed, there's more features, it seems to integrate much better. There's things that come standard with the Bambu that seem like add-ons for the Prusa. And it's all delivered at a lower cost than the Prusa. I mean, these Bambu people, they have to pay tariffs too. But they've done their supply chain right to get these things into the country and get them to, American consumers at a cost-effective price. So, more features for less money move me to this platform. I will see, give this a year or two or more and see how this thing holds up. Maybe, I will be proven wrong and this thing doesn't hold up as well as a Prusa would. I don't know. These things are very new. Anyhow, let me know, do you own a Prusa? Do you own a Bambu printer? Are you thinking of buying one? What is your logic? What are you going to buy? What are you going to print with it? Are my observations good or my observations off base? Leave me some comments. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching my video. Please visit my website at www.smbaker.com for more electronics projects and sandrail stuff. Bye.